the end of 1996, Konami brought Suikoden to the PlayStation. The game captivated the minds of RPG enthusiasts and became a surprise success. In the following years, fans wondered what would come next from the series. In 1998, the company finally answered with Suikoden II, the sequel to the original game. The follow-up offered incredible characters, unique combat mechanics, and a fantastic musical score. However, the most noteworthy facet may have been the game's underlying story. In this video, I'll provide a complete, concise, storyline explanation for the entirety of the game. And now, let's get into the tale. 3 years prior to the events of Suikoden II, the Liberation Army, led by Tyr McDole, defeated Emperor Barbarossa. The event toppled the Scarlet Moon Empire and the Toran Republic was established. In the next years, a conflict broke out between the Kingdom of Highland and the city-states of Jowston in the north. As the game begins, the war between the two powers is drawing to a close. An armistice has been signed, and a peace treaty is pending. Two young soldiers of the Unicorn Brigade of the Highland Army, Ryo and Joey, share their joy at the end of the conflict. Joey notes that Nanami, the stepsister of Ryo, awaits him in Kyaro. The two were adopted by Genkaku, a deceased former hero of the war. In the camp, the soldiers express their desire to return home. Ryo and Joey's commander, Raud, instructs them to turn in for the evening. In the middle of the night, however, they are alerted to a surprise attack. In shock, they run out of their tent to find that the encampment is on fire, and Commander Raud says that the city-state has broken the armistice. He instructs them all to escape through the mountain path nearby. Fearing an ambush, however, they return to the camp to find that Luca Blight, the ambitious Prince of Highland, has arrived. As it turns out, the city-states of Jowston have not attacked at all, and Luca and Raud have conspired to execute a false flag operation to exacerbate the conflict. Raud reports that everything went as planned. Luca boasts of his strength and states his intention to dispose of the peace treaty with Jowston entirely. Overhearing the entire conversation, Ryo and Joey run to the cliff to the north. When they get there, they find that Raud has tracked them down and threatened to make them victims of the false attack. After defeating Raud's soldiers, Joey proposes jumping off the cliff. Before they do so, however, they decide to strike a gash in the nearby rock and promise each other to return to the same spot in the event that the two get separated. The two friends jump off the cliff together. At this point, the game presents a flashback of the lives of Ryo and Joey, who are lifelong best friends. Under the guidance of Genkaku, they are trained as fighters at a young age. When they acquire sufficient skill in battle, they ship off to the war to aid Highland. After time passes, a ragged man wakes Ryo, who washed ashore after drifting down a stream. Ryo tells the man his name and explains his circumstances. He discovers that the man is Victor, leader of the mercenary army and friend of the city-state of Jowston. At that moment, a man named Flick arrives and speaks of another man that he lost sight of. Victor brings Ryo back to his fort where he says he will be his personal guest. However, he is soon jailed as a prisoner and put to work to organize the fort. He is eventually sent on an errand to Ryube Village, accompanied by Gengen and Tuta, inhabitants of the fort. At Ryube's medicine shop, Ryo acquires the flower he was sent for. When it is brought back to the mercenary fortress, Pol assigns additional chores to Ryo. After some time passes, Joey has managed to break into the structure and calls out for his friend. He uses his bow to break down the cell door and attempts to escape. However, Ryo and Joey are stopped by Flick and Victor. Joey explains that he and Ryo were caught up in Luca Blight's false flag operation and states his intention to escape. Even so, Victor places them back into the holding cell, where Joey tells Ryo he was nursed back to health in Toto Village. That night, Joey uses his ingenuity to break through the cell door. While he creates a diversion with the burning rag, the two attempt to escape from a balcony with Ryo's rope. Outside, Joey warns that Kyaro may be dangerous, but the friends decide to go anyway because they figure that Nanami is worried. On the way, Ryo and Joey meet a group of traveling performers, Rina, Ailey, and Bolgan. After a brief performance, they propose to join the soldiers because they are also headed to Highland. However, they warn of a mist monster that stands in the way of their journey. At the North Sparrow Pass, state soldiers are standing guard and say that passage has been prohibited by the order of Mayor Annabelle of Muse. Rune convinces the guard to break the rules and let them all pass, and says all it took was an adult conversation. Near the end of the pass, the group runs into the mist shade they were warned about, which forms from swirling winds. After the adversary is overcome, they find their way north to Kyaro, the hometown of Rio and Joey. At the gates, the traveling performers part ways with the two friends and thank them for their assistance. Joey says he will be going to his own home and recommends that Rio go see Nanami. Outside of his home, Nanami is shocked to see Rio arrive and runs to tackle him. She says she's been worried sick about him and asks about the surprise attack by the state. She says there's been rumors of spies and that Commander Raud said that Rio should report to him upon his return. Whatever Rio did, Nanami says she will assist him no matter what. Before they leave, however, they pay their respects to Genkaku, whose grave is nearby. Just as they exit the home, Highland soldiers approach. They say that Rio is to be arrested as a spy for the city-state of Jowston. Nanami protests and the two prepare to fight. After defeating the soldiers, Commander Raud instructs Rio to come along quietly. Unable to escape, Rio and Nanami are captured and taken away. Meanwhile, Joey's stepfather Marcel says he believes Joey is a spy. He disowns Joey as his son and says he is no longer an Atreides. Joey's brother Marco ridicules him as well, and Marcel says that Joey's mother Rosa doesn't want to see him at all. Joey is brought into a holding cell with Rio and Nanami. Through the bars, Raud approaches. Joey demands an answer for the false attack. Raud admits that Luca Blight's ambition for power matched his own aims, and that the Unicorn Brigade was massacred to whip people into a frenzy. Raud also expresses his desire for a promotion, which he believes he can secure by executing the three as spies. With their deaths, he says, the truth will be hidden forever. Rio and Joey are bound and march through the town square, where Gilia Blight, Luca's half-sister and the Princess of Highland, stops to take notice. Joey insists that he has not betrayed the kingdom, and she rides away. As they are beaten upon the scaffold, Raud tells them to gaze into the sunset, as it will be their last. As the pompous commander is distracted though, he fails to take notice of Flick and Victor, who have come to set them free. Raud runs away, and Rio and Joey resolve to save Nanami. Even though they still consider Rio and Joey their prisoners, Victor and Flick join the party to assist. As Nanami charges through Highland soldiers standing in her way, the group enters the same area. As they reunite, Nanami says her intention was to save them. As they exit Kyaro, she wonders if they'll ever be able to see the town again, having now been shunned by Highland and declared traitors. Back at the mercenary fortress, Victor tells the three that they are still his prisoners, but they might as well travel the world to find recruits. Flick says he will contemplate the best way to return to Highland. At Toto Village, Joey comes across Palika, who calls him uncle. As he explains, when he and Rio were separated, Palika and her family nursed him back to health. Inside her home, Marx and Joanna greet Joey again and are glad to see he has found his friends. Later, Palika asks Rio and Joey to buy an amulet at the item store in Muse, which she intends to give her father for his birthday. Inside, the store owner says that the item is not for sale, but was left by a customer with an overdue bill. Still, he agrees to part ways with it for 500 potch. When the group returns to Toto Village, they find it completely destroyed. A hysterical Palika says that her father told her to hide. When she returned, she found both of her parents dead. As Joey tries to comfort her, a woman named Apple arrives and asks if Rio and his friends are survivors. According to her, Luca Blight razed the village and looted everything just to entertain his troops. She asks to be taken to Victor, and everyone leaves town. Back at the mercenary fortress, Apple says that Luca has set his sights on an invasion of the city-state, but the mercenary fortress is along the same path. As it appears, Highland's prince has used the fraudulent surprise attack narrative to rouse citizens to avenge the deaths of the Unicorn Brigade. After Palika cries herself to sleep, Joey admits that he doesn't know who to feel loyal to anymore, and doesn't know who to trust. When they return to the strategy room, Victor says they've decided to fight. Flick will travel to Muse to gather reinforcements, Apple will attempt to lay traps, and Victor will gather soldiers and weapons. Victor unveils plans for fire spears, the same weapons used by the Liberation Army against the Scarlet Moon Empire in years past. He says that the spears are in the fort's storeroom and they can only be fixed by a man named Sai. Ryo and Joey are to find him in the mountains near Ryube and obtain his assistance. In the woods, the adventurers find Sai in his home. When he is told about the fire spears, he mentions that he has already heard about Luca Blight's deeds at Toto and agrees to join the struggle against him. Joey offers him a payment in return, but he says he would only accept it after the Highland army is defeated. As they leave the area, they all witness the scourge of war spread, and soldiers are on the move to attack another defenseless village. As citizens attempt to flee and beg for their lives, Luca Blight strikes down a helpless man and is approached by a distraught woman. Though she pleads for her life, he mocks her and slashes her violently with his blade. Highland General Kiba asks if the prince is finished, but Luca says his sword still thirsts for blood and commands all of his troops to burn the village to the ground. When Ryo, Joey, and Sai witness the aftermath of the atrocity, they all resolve to defend the mercenary fortress against Luca and the Highland army. When they return, Victor says he heard about Luca Blight's massacre. He also greets Sai, who says he will begin work on the fire spears immediately. Victor instructs Ryo and Joey to escape to Muse City. When Ryo offers to join the fight instead, Flick says he will test him in battle to determine his dedication. The two enter into a one-on-one duel, but Flick is defeated. Afterward, Ryo and Joey are allowed to defend the fort against Highland and command a company in battle. Ultimately, the two decide to name the unit the Orange Company. When the Highland army goes on the march, Pole alerts the fort. In the courtyard, Victor warns everyone to prepare for a fierce battle. Apple says some traps have been set, and Sai says the fire spears are now ready. According to Apple, support from Muse should arrive in 10 days, and a defensive stand should be made in the meantime. Solon G, one of Luca Blight's zealous generals, portrays the fort's occupants as shivering little mice, but Colgan warns him not to be reckless. Ryo and Joey make use of the fire spears, surprising G and achieving a victory for the mercenary fortress. However, immediately after the battle, it is reported that Luca Blight has ordered a follow-up attack. This time, Kiba attacks the mercenary army along with Solon G. Just as the battle is to begin, Luca's forces magically appear and the Highland army encircles and overwhelms the fortress. Flick orders everyone to split up and run away, admitting that the fort is lost. Intending to save Palika, Ryo and Joey fight their way through soldiers and find Luca inside of the strategy room. He strikes Pole down with a single blow, then turns and threatens a bawling Palika. When he moves to slash her, Ryo and Joey leap to her defense, and the prince threatens them as well. In that moment though, Flick rushes in to rescue Palika. Victor says he tossed the fire spears into the boiler, which will soon explode. They all depart in the nick of time, and Luca says he will make them regret their resistance. In Toto, Palika runs toward the back of the city and enters into a passageway without notice. Within, an inscription on the stone reveals that two friends once sealed their thoughts inside and regret that they could not make them one. The message is signed by Genkaku, Ryo and Nanami's stepfather, and Han Cunningham, Genkaku's best friend and soldier of Highland. In that moment, Leknod appears, the keeper of the gate rune. She then asks Ryo and Joey to step forward as the heralds that summon the stars of destiny. As they walk through the corridor, scenes from their past are recalled again, including the day they met for the first time. As Ryo was bullied as a child and mocked for having a coward for a father, Joey defended him to his own detriment. The two learn that one of the 27 true runes rests inside the cavern. Joey is immediately drawn to the Black Sword rune for its power. Ryo, on the other hand, is attracted to the Bright Shield rune for its defensive potential. As a whole, the two parts form the Rune of Beginning. In search of Victor, Joey asks the state soldier to allow them into Muse. Despite Nanami's rage, they are all turned away. With the help of Alex, they sneak into the Sindarin ruins nearby. Inside the ruins, the party runs into a two-headed Hydra named Doublehead. When it is defeated, they proceed inward. Despite Alex's aspirations to find a valuable treasure, a chest behind the monster contains only a healing herb. Back at his home, Alex's wife Hilda has collapsed. Using the healing herb found in the ruins, however, Hilda recovers. In return for their assistance, Alex gives Ryo and Joey an entry permit to Muse. The group pretends to be Alex and his family, but the soldiers realize their trickery and imprison them inside. That night, Joey admits being envious of Ryo and Nanami for sharing such a close bond with Genkaku, a bond he never shared with his own blood. When the war is over, Ryo and Joey agree to return home and restart Genkaku's dojo again. In the middle of the night, Victor and Flick arrive to free the four from their captivity. In the city hall, Victor introduces Ryo, Joey, and Nanami to Lady Annabelle, the mayor of Muse and head of the Jowston Alliance. As it turns out, she's aware of all three of them from their time in Kyaro. With the help of some fake Youth Brigade uniforms, Jess asks the team to sneak into Luca Blight's encampment to gather intelligence on Highland provisions. After sneaking into the neutral zone with Highland and donning the fake uniforms, the group makes their way inside the Highland camp. Ryo and Joey use a ploy to get inside the provision tent and find that it contains about 2 weeks of supplies. As they leave, they are discovered by Raud, so they flee into a nearby tent. Inside, they stumble upon Princess Jillia of Highland, who they make aware of their circumstances. She knowingly hides the two from Raud, who is rejected when he attempts to search her tent. The princess admits that her brother is trying to expand the war through evil means, and regrets that she has little power to stop him. As they head into the forest, Raud surprises Ryo and Joey again, and now suspects Jillia of treachery for harboring them. After defeating a group of Highland soldiers, Joey decides to distract Raud so Ryo can escape, and promises to catch up with him later. Raud taunts Joey, who calls upon the Black Sword Rune to give him strength to overcome his situation. As he reunites with Nanami, Ryo explains that Joey stayed behind to help him escape. While waiting for Joey to return, Ryo and Nanami find Victor and Flick drinking at the local bar in Muse. Victor is angry to learn that Ryo and Joey were sent beyond enemy lines for reconnaissance in a battle that wasn't theirs. After Ryo reports that Highland has brought 2 weeks worth of provisions, everyone is sure that the army will strike soon. Nanami waits outside the city gate, worried for Joey. After reminiscing about their past, Joey appears in the distance and they all rush to greet him. The next day, Victor reports that leaders from all 5 state cities of Jowston are at a summit to discuss plans for dealing with Highland. At the Hilltop Conference, several city leaders are skeptical that Highland is ready to strike so soon. Captain of the Matilda Knights, Gerudo, stirs dissension when he refuses to commit his forces to the fight. In the middle of the meeting, a messenger reports that Highland has already attacked Jowston's border guards. Annabelle orders everyone to gather their armies, but the meeting concludes without a unified front against Luca Blight. Annabelle asks Victor and his friends to delay the Highland army, but apologizes to Ryo and Joey for involving them. After the battle, she promises to tell Ryo and Nanami more about Master Genkaku. The next morning, the mercenary army commits to protecting Muse. On the battlefield, Sloane G advances again. In the middle of the battle, Camus of the Matilda Knights appears and instructs Miklatov that Commander Gerudo has instructed them to withdraw their forces immediately. Despite this, the mercenary army emerges victorious and manages to slow the Highland army down. As Ryo and Nanami go to sleep, Joey is seen discussing an unknown subject with the ninja Cage. The next day, Gustav balks on assisting Jowston's crusade against Highland, and Grandmire takes offense. Ryo and Nanami decide to visit Annabelle later. Joey abruptly leaves the group and asks Nanami to take care of Palika. When he is approached later, Joey says Ryo and Nanami should run far away from the war. Later that night, Victor and Annabelle share a drink together and discuss the impending predicament. After Victor leaves, Ryo and Nanami head to see Annabelle. Before they reach her, Joey enters her room and asks to talk with her. In a moment of surprise, he raises a knife and declares his intention to take her life. She asks if he can truly bear the burden of the decision he's about to make, but admits she cannot stop his intent. As he hesitates, Annabelle attempts to defend herself. As Ryo and Nanami get into the room, they see Joey standing over her body. After asking their forgiveness, he runs out of the room. As the Highland army advances upon the city, the dying Annabelle apologizes for the pain Genkaku suffered. With her last words, she asks Ryo and Nanami to live and run. After retrieving Palika, Leona tells Ryo and Nanami that everyone intends to rendezvous at South Window. At night, Nanami questions whether Joey really could have assassinated Annabelle. They are all blocked from sailing to Couscous by a Highland soldier, but run into Eiley, Rena, and Bolgan again. Ryo and Nanami meet Tai Ho, who agrees to bring them to Couscous on his boat if Ryo can win a dice game against him. After he is beaten, he brings the group across the lake on his ship. When the adventurers meet up with Victor in South Window, he says he heard that Annabelle was assassinated, but cannot bring himself to believe it was Joey. he states his intention to recruit friends in the area and discuss his plans with Grandmire, the mayor of the town. Victor pledges to assist the mayor with recruitment. However, he learns that women have begun to go missing in North Window, where Victor was born. After learning of this, the scene shifts to an auditorium where the vampire Neclord is seen playing the organ. When the group arrives, Victor explains that the inhabitants of the town were killed by the vampire. Just then, Neclord appears. Under the earnest belief that he had killed the vampire with his own hands in the events of the first game, Victor is shocked. As they soon discover, Neclord is the source of the recent disappearances. After Neclord threatens the party, he says he will destroy the Star Dragon sword that slayed him years ago. Devoted to finding the sword again, Victor leads the team into the Cave of the Wind. Inside, they find the vampire hunter Khan, who also intends to put an end to Neclord. Soon enough, Rio and his friends find the Star Dragon sword again. The sword becomes animated and fights the party. When it is defeated, the snarky sword agrees to lend its aid to Victor once again. Khan tells the party he knows how to seal Neclord's power, so the group heads to the castle. Using the Night Rune, Neclord produces an illusion of Daisy, a childhood friend of Victor. Not to be fooled though, he slices the head off the likeness and confronts Neclord. However, the vampire flees from the room by way of his magic and leaves behind a giant five-headed foe called Abomination. When it's destroyed, they part ways with Khan, who intends to follow the vampire. As they are about to leave town, Flick arrives to relay the news that South Window has already fallen to Highland. As it turns out, the mayor surrendered unconditionally. Solone G executed Grandmire and hung his head from the castle gate. Despite their desire to oppose Highland, Victor and Flick realize that their forces are too weak at the moment. Apple suggests tracking down a brilliant strategist named Shu, who lives in Rodot Town. Both Apple and Shu were students of Matthew, the renowned strategist of the Liberation Army during the events of the first game. In Rodot, Rio and his friends meet Shu. Though he's courteous to Apple, Shu is reluctant to assist despite his disdain for Luca Blight. He says that he is indifferent in regard to which side emerges victorious in the war, and says he is now committed to commercial pursuits. Shu dismisses the group from his home. After Apple uses her ingenuity to retrieve a gold coin he tosses into the nearby river, however, he agrees to help the cause. Because Rio bears a legendary rune and is Genkaku's son, Shu says they might all stand a chance against Highland. Shu meets Victor and tells him that his orders must be followed if they all expect to defeat the Highland army. Victor is taken by his fervor, but agrees to allow Shu to formulate a plan. Shu instructs Freed to spread the rumor that all South Window soldiers will be executed when the war is over, and puts Rio in charge of a unit to outflank the army and surprise Solone G himself. On the battlefield, Solone G boasts of his power again, but Colgan warns that Highland's forces are too spread out. Rio successfully leads his unit and strikes Solone G, who is forced to order a full retreat. Rio is greeted as a hero, and Victor and Flick congratulate him. Shu says that Rio should be placed at the head of a new state army because of his ability to unite the people. He adds that Rio carries the Bright Shield rune, the same one carried by his father Genkaku. Overwhelmed by the choice before him, Rio meets Victor at a nearby tavern. Victor divulges that Annabelle intended to tell him of Genkaku's past. As he comes to find out, Annabelle's father Daryl was the leader of the state army 30 years ago, at the same time Han Cunningham led the Highland army. During the course of the war, Genkaku rose through the ranks of the state army and became a great hero of the war. Despite being on opposing sides, he and Han became great friends, and both came to believe that the war was irrational and should be ended immediately. They both developed a peace treaty to end the war, but Daryl attempted to prolong it. King Agaris Blight of Highland suggested ending the war through a duel between champions. Highland chose Han, and the state army chose Genkaku. Just as the duel was to take place though, Genkaku refused to fight his friend. Highland won the war and acquired Kyaro as a result. Genkaku was quickly branded a traitor and exiled from his home. Eventually, it became known that Daryl handed Genkaku a poison-laced sword, which he refused to use against Han. Even though Genkaku's name was eventually cleared, he never returned to the city-state. Instead, he lived quietly, raising and training Rio and Nanami. Victor reminds Rio that he's his own man, and they all go to sleep. The next morning, Rio declares his commitment to lead the new state army. Everyone rallies behind him and commits to defeating Luca Blight. Everyone also allows Rio the opportunity to rename North Window Castle, so he decides to call it Dunan Castle. Immediately afterward, Leknot appears, the keeper of the Gate Rune. She informs everyone that the stars of destiny are poised to gather once again, and gives Ryo the stone tablet of promise so that he can record the names of his followers. To assist the party, Luca appears and agrees to join as well. Leknot warns that both Ryo, the holder of the Bright Shield rune, and Joey, the holder of the Black Sword rune, have hard roads ahead. Soon enough, Ryo and the New State Army are asked by Fitcher to go to Two Rivers City and confront the Highland Army. Tai-Ho agrees to provide assistance, and with the help of his boat, everyone makes their way there. In Two Rivers City, Ridley notices that Ryo carries the same rune his father once did, so he introduces him to Makai, the town leader. After resting for the night, Ryo follows Ridley after the kobold says he can no longer ally with humans and storms out of the room. Along the way, they are diverted into the sewers after a winged inhabitant, Chaco, steals Fitcher's wallet. There, they enter a secret passageway and encounter the giant pest rat. After he is defeated, they find Lord Ridley, who explains that he has stopped trusting Makai and the humans because he discovered a secret treaty that would give amnesty and possession of the Kobold District to the humans and create an alliance with Highland. As Ridley suggested, General Kiba of Highland arrives to offer the treaty to Makai. Skeptical that Kiba is trying to drive a wedge between the humans and non-humans, Makai seems poised to accept. Nevertheless, Kiba's olive branch is exposed as a ruse, and he orders his soldiers to advance upon the city. The humans take to fighting with the help of the Orange Army. Ryo leaves the battlefield to convince Ridley to assist, and informs him that the treaty was a farce. In the meantime, the winged inhabitants show up to assist the humans. Eventually, Ridley and the kobolds come to bolster the forces of Two River. Kiba's troops are soon outnumbered and forced to retreat. As Salone G explains his recent loss to Luca Blight, he is berated by his superior and relieved of his duties. Joey, now in the garb of a Highland aristocrat, volunteers to take over his position as general. With only 5,000 men and the prisoners of Muse, he says, he will take Greenhill for Highland. Admiring his ambition, Luca agrees to Joey's proposal. Makai thanks the Orange Army for their help and agrees to lend his hand to the effort to challenge Highland. Back at Dunan Castle, Shu relays the news that Greenhill has fallen to Highland, and wonders how it was accomplished by such a small force. The Orange Army doesn't have enough resources to retake the town, Shu says, so he intends to get the acting mayor of Greenhill, Teresa, to safety. To sneak into the city, younger members of the Orange Army are utilized to blend into the student population of the town. Using forged enrollment papers, the group enters Greenhill. While in the town, they learn the story of Greenhill's capture. After enrolling the younger members into the academy, the group observes Highland soldiers led by Raud harassing the villagers in a witch hunt to find Teresa. Flick uses intimidation to save Fitcher, who has also snuck into town. As they all discover, Shin and a group of clandestine loyalists are hiding Teresa in the nearby woods. Teresa steps out to greet them and takes their word that they are allies and part of the Orange Army. She says that because she has abandoned the citizens of Greenhill, she is no longer apt to assist. Before the battle, she says, Highland released captured soldiers from Muse, who fled to Greenhill. Everyone rejoiced at first, thinking they were allies. Eventually, Highland began a siege, but did not attack outright. Greenhill experienced a food shortage due to the unexpected number of soldiers, and inhabitants began fighting over the provisions. Soldiers from Muse rebelled and captured local storehouses, which made Teresa believe that the arrival of the soldiers was a ruse set up by Highland. Now in disgrace, Teresa's no longer acting mayor and says Ryo and his party should return home. As they get back to town, Raud announces a reward of 20,000 Poch and Highland citizenship to anyone who captures Teresa. As the citizens seem distrustful, Joey surprisingly steps forward as well. He tells everyone that Highland soldiers involved in the uproar a day earlier are being punished, and swears that the promises of the prince will be kept. Utterly shocked at Joey's presence, Palika runs into the town square. She is followed by Ryo and the others, who run into Joey and begin to ask him questions. As the soldiers and townsfolk attempt to apprehend them as accused spies, they all flee to Teresa. Despite everyone's attempts to help her escape, she intends to surrender herself to Highland. Her execution, she says, will lead to happier days for Greenhill. Shin and Teresa stand before Raud, who orders his men to apprehend them. However, Shin resists, and Ryo and the Orange Army follow afterward. In the same moment, people from town have come to give Teresa their verbal support. Now surrounded by opposition, Raud is forced to flee with his men. As they all leave town, Raud catches up to the group. Ryo and the others escape with Teresa, while Shin stays behind to delay Raud. As they run through the forest, Palika finds Joey, who walks toward everyone. Without answering why he has done what he has, he suggests that Rio disband the Orange Army and run away. The victor in the war, he says, has already been decided, and continued fighting will only prolong the suffering. He says he will stop Luca Blight from unleashing his full wrath against the city-state, but remains firm in his advice. As Highland troops run in pursuit of them, Rio and his friends escape before being seen. Joey says farewell and walks away. In a cover for Rio, Joey tells Raud and his minions he hasn't seen anyone. Colgan appears and confirms that no one suspicious headed the same way. When Raud leaves, both Colgan and Seed admit that they love Highland but believe Luca Blight will bring the country to ruin. Teresa is welcomed in Dunan, and Shin arrives safely as well. For taking Greenhill, Luca tells Joey he will grant him whatever he wishes. He surprisingly asks for Luca's sister, Gilia Blight, to be his wife. Luca does not turn the idea down, but does threaten violence against Joey. Regardless, Joey asks to talk with Luca in private about a plan he has. In strategic discussions at Dunan, Shu suggests forging an alliance with Matilda, as the kingdom has not yet fallen to the power of Highland. With their assistance, he says, they can attack the enemy on two fronts. In pastures near the kingdom, Miklatov receives Rio and his party. Gerudo, the leader of Matilda, says that rumors of the Orange Army's victory over Highland must have been exaggerated. He mocks Rio and his friends and tells Camus to escort them out of the castle the next morning. During the night, Leknot appears and gives Rio encouragement to keep fighting. The next morning, Miklatov reports that the Highland army has appeared on the Matilda-Muse border, threatening the kingdom. Without time to spare, Gerudo orders his forces to mobilize, and Rio and his friends escape the quandary. When the battle begins, Luca appears and promises to slay the refugees from Muse. Despite Luca's aggression, Gerudo sits on the border and refuses to help, even though Miklatov insists on giving them support. The refugees are slaughtered, and both Matilda and Highland leave the battlefield. Because Luca left Matilda unscathed, Gerudo does not believe he seeks to challenge Matilda. Upset about the king's position, Miklatov decides to enter Muse on his own. Rio and his friends follow after him. They are sidetracked in Highway Village, where they find Futch and Humphrey, adventurers that once served in the Liberation Army. They learn that a villager named Kent heard Futch's tale of being a dragon knight and was inspired to head to Mount Rakute alone. Rio joins up with Futch and Humphrey, and they climb the mountain in pursuit. Just as they find Kent on the ground at the summit, the gigantic harpy attacks. When it's defeated, Kent is safe. Futch says his story was a tall tale, and that the scale of his old dragon Black was merely a memento. Even so, they find a dragon egg which hatches into a young dragon. The event inspires Futch to become a dragon knight once again, and he names the dragon Bright. Futch and Humphrey join the Orange Army. After Rio catches up to Miklatov at the Matilda-Muse border, they decide to join up and are allowed through the gate. Just as they approach Muse, though, a giant maelstrom of energy bursts into the sky, and a two-headed wolf appears in the mist. As it turns out, it was the work of Luca Blight, who has sacrificed the souls of the town to the Beast Rune. Joey remains silent nearby, and Luca says he senses his dark potential. Finding that the town has been utterly annihilated, the group heads back to Matilda. After Miklatov reports the news to Gerudo, the Lord is unmoved. Still convinced that Highland does not intend to strike Matilda, he refuses to commit any troops to danger. In disgust, Miklatov resigns from his post, throwing his insignia onto the ground. Camus does the same, refusing to heed Gerudo's order to arrest Miklatov. The two join the Orange Army along with many other knights, and they all pledge to help Rio. When Joey meets with Luca Blight, the prince reveals he knows that there are some that question his leadership over Highland. To address his concerns, Joey has recruited Leon Silverberg, master strategist and uncle of the late Matthew Silverberg. Before he leaves, Luca implies that he has accepted Joey's proposal to marry Gilia. At Dunan, Shu reports that Highland has moved into Radat town. There, Kiba and Klaus declare that the town is under Highland rule. Kiba denies the rumor that inhabitants of Muse were devoured by a monster. Klaus tells Rio about the forthcoming wedding of Joey to Gilia. In the Great Hall of Dunan, Shu says that no special strategy is necessary against Kiba, and the Orange Army deploys its troops. Disagreement in tactics leads Ridley to order the kobolds to leave the battle. In the end, the Orange Army is forced to withdraw entirely. In Highland, Joey undergoes a ritual to become a knight. Joey then swears eternal fealty to the king in a blood oath. During the process of the ceremony, Luca and Joey work together to poison the king. The king begins bleeding from the mouth and falls to the ground. Luca cackles in amusement and berates his father for failing to protect his own wife and kingdom. It turns out that Luca's mother was attacked and raped by bandits long ago. When Gilia was born, Luca's mother died, and the prince blamed his father for the tragedy. Gilia discovers what has been done, and is overwhelmed with sadness. When the Orange Army meets Kiba on the battlefield again, a signal is given for an ambush against Highland. In a surprise, Ridley and the Kobolds arrive to assist Rio and his friends. After the Orange Army inflicts many casualties, Leon reports that Luca Blight has given orders for a full retreat. Without the assistance of Raud, Kiba and Klaus are captured. When Kiba and Klaus discover that Highland's king has been murdered by Luca, the two become furious and ultimately decide to join the Orange Army. Now with about 25,000 soldiers, the force is considerable, but still much smaller than the Highland army. As they are discussing strategy, Sheena enters the room. As the son of Lepant, the president of the Toran Republic, he advises Rio and his friends to talk with his father and form an alliance. Shu agrees, and the Orange Army forms a team to make contact. The former bandit Varkas meets the party and escorts them to Gregminster, the capital of the Toran Republic. In the castle, Lepant grants them all an audience. The president is initially skeptical that an alliance can be formed with the city-state, given the history of violence between the two powers. Nevertheless, Lepant says that Rio reminds him of Tyr, the young man who led the Liberation Army to victory over Emperor Barbarossa and the Scarlet Moon Empire. With this in mind, he gives Rio the choice of either Valeria or Kasumi as the commander of the Toran forces. Sheena joins as well, and everyone heads back to Dunan after the alliance is formed. According to Apple, 50,000 troops from Highland are advancing toward Dunan. With the addition of Toran troops, the Orange Army numbers only 20,000. In Highland, Leon says the best strategy is to capture Radat, South Window, and then Dunan. However, Luca Blight advises going straight to Dunan, figuring that the loss of the castle would force a surrender on its own. Joey and Sasarai of Harmonia, the bearer of the true Earth Rune, form an advanced guard. In Radat, Lord Ridley's forces have been ambushed. The Orange Army attempts to bail them out with reinforcements, but Joey and Sasarai prove to be too strong to overcome. Despite not knowing the fate of Ridley and the Kobold unit, Shu calls for a retreat. When the Orange Army discusses Sasarai and the War Rune, Luke says he knows him extremely well and insists on being given the responsibility of taking him out. Now in the Highland camp, Ridley has been captured by Luca Blight. Leon says that he recently called up a brilliant young general that is eager to assist Highland, but does not name him. Because they are outnumbered, Shu recommends ending the war by targeting Luca himself, which would make Gilia the successor and likely lead to a peace treaty. Rio is given the responsibility of leading the mission, and Kiba tasked with setting up an ambush of Luca. On the battlefield, Luca berates Kiba as a traitor who responds that Luca is the true villain for murdering his father. Luca pursues his former general, and the Orange Army deploys as planned. Despite surrounding Luca, he escapes while using his incredible power to inflict enormous damage upon Rio and the others, and the Orange Army is forced to retreat. Afterward, Ridley appears at Dunan, having escaped with the help of Sasuke and Mondo. Ridley also carries a message from Leon indicating that Luca Blight will shortly be leading a nighttime raid. Despite warnings that it could be a trap, Shu urges Rio to seize the opportunity to trick the zealous king. Luca launches his night raid, but is alarmed to discover that the Orange Army troops are rapidly approaching. A barrage of their arrows suddenly knocks Luca off his horse, but Highland forces quickly attempt to protect him. After taunting Flick's ambush party, he attacks. After he is bested for the moment, he is then cornered by Rio and the others, and faces two other contingents of the Orange Army. After appearing to be backed into a corner, he finds a wooden amulet in a tree, which releases fireflies when opened. Unbeknownst to Luca, the device reveals his position to the Orange Army archers, who heed Shu's command and unleash a barrage of arrows against him. Even though he's wounded by the arrows, he challenges Rio to a one-on-one duel. Rio is now able to overcome Luca and defeats him in front of everyone. The fallen tyrant mocks his adversaries for trying to end the war and devoting so much attention to his downfall. Ultimately, he collapses to the ground, ending the reign of the treacherous king. Joey and Leon, who are hiding nearby, secretly rejoice in his demise. Joey hopes to be brave in the coming days, and the two walk away. Upon his return to Dunan, Rio collapses from fatigue and is put to rest in his bed. In Highland, an elaborate ceremony takes place to wed Joey to Gilia Blight. The two exchange vows, and in the process, Gilia pronounces him the new king of Highland. The soldiers then draw their swords in his honor. When Rio recovers, he learns that a man named Tyr is fishing in Banner Village. As it turns out, the former leader of the Liberation Army has been traveling with Gremio after his victory over the Scarlet Moon Empire. villagers report that a boy named Ko ran into the nearby hills. The Soul Eater responds to the circumstances, and Tyr falls to the ground. Gremio reminds him that Ted and his grandfather gave their lives to protect the rune. Rio and Tyr decide to join forces to rescue Ko. The boy has been captured by bandits who are overwhelmed by the mere presence of the two renowned figures, Tyr and Rio. The bandits flee, and Ko is found. However, the giant foe Worm confronts them. After he is defeated, Varkas is stunned to see Tyr again. In Gregminster, Lucan treats Ko, who makes a full recovery. Lapan offers Tyr the presidency of the Toran Republic, proclaiming that it was rightfully his in the first place. However, Tyr turns the offer down, wishing instead to travel the world. In town, Pan and Cleo welcome Tyr as well. Before leaving Gregminster, Tyr agrees to join Rio and the Orange Army. Colgan travels to Dunan with the intention of offering a peace treaty from Highland, and requests that Rio and Teresa accompany him to Muse to meet with Joey. When the Orange Army forces arrive, Rio stares directly at Joey, his best friend and head of the opposing side. After formalities, Leon demands an unconditional surrender from the Orange Army. Joey threatens violence if they do not agree, and Highland soldiers take aim at the party. Joey says that the war is larger than Luca Blight and prohibits them all from leaving. In that moment, Victor bursts through the door and Palika runs inside. Rio and the others take the opportunity to escape from the hall. When Leon begins to order a reprisal, Joey stops him from striking Rio in front of Palika. As it turns out, Shu has executed a brilliant maneuver to save the party in the case of a trap. A bandit named Koyu travels to the castle and warns that the region near Tinto has been attacked by the pale-faced dead. Victor realizes he must be referring to zombies and immediately suspects Neclord. Rio, Nanami, and Victor head to Tinto, intent on slaying the infamous vampire. Victor promises to protect the town from the undead in exchange for Tinto's entry into the war against Highland. Gustav agrees to the arrangement, recognizing the legitimacy of the Orange Army on the basis of its triumph over Luca Blight. In the morning, Ridley has brought Orange Army troops at the request of Shu, and the Lamp Dragon bandits join the cause as well. In fright, Gustav's daughter Lily says that monsters have swarmed into town. Neclord has appeared with an army of zombies, and taunts the villagers and the Orange Army alike. The vampire says he intends to create a kingdom in the mountains, and says he will turn anyone who opposes him into a zombie. As Victor antagonizes him, Neclord disappears, and the zombies wander away. Jess does not trust Rio and accuses him of killing Lady Annabelle because he was standing in her room as she died. The next morning, Jess has sent soldiers to strike Neclord without instruction from Gustav. Determined to assist, Rio and Nanami enter into the town mines, where a tunnel has recently collapsed. Inside, they surprisingly find Neclord, who attacks Rio and Nanami. In the process, he uses his dark power in an attempt to place a curse upon Rio. As he does, the bright shield rune reacts to the circumstances and forms a protective shield that rejects the curse. After the two escape, Rio falls to the ground in exhaustion, but Nanami helps him back to Tinto. When he awakens 2 days later, the town has been conquered by Neclord, and Jess, Hauser, and Lily are missing. They run into the vampire hunter Khan again, who joins the group with the intention of slaying Neclord and sealing his soul so he cannot revive again. The team also recruits Sierra, a pale-faced vampire seeking the moon rune that Neclord stole from her. In the cave to the east, the party is attacked by the stone golem. When it's defeated, they proceed and find Neclord terrorizing Lily and Koyu's sister Lowen. Victor and the others charge in to interrupt him, and the Star Dragon Sword threatens him. Khan traps Neclord in his seal, and the vampire attacks the party, vowing to unleash the full force of the moon rune. Sierra commands the rune to subdue its power for the moment, and Neclord attacks in desperation. When he's defeated, he transfers the moon rune back to Sierra. Victor takes hold of the Star Dragon Sword and slashes Neclord. The soul of the vampire is now sealed for all eternity, and Lily and Lowen are saved. Jess and Hauser return unscathed, and the entire town pledges fealty to the Orange Army. The Orange Army now possesses the resources to launch a counterstrike against Highland, whose army is gathering near Muse. According to Apple, Greenhill is now under the occupation of Yuber, the immensely powerful general that has played a role in numerous wars on the continent. With the opportunity to take back Greenhill, they plan a campaign to liberate the city the next day. That night, an assassin named Lucia appears in Rio's bedroom and attempts to kill him. After he defeats her, however, he agrees to let her leave. Under Shu's plan, one portion of the Orange Army will slow down the enemy forces coming from Muse, while the other takes Greenhill. On the battlefield near the city, Yuber makes a stand against the Orange Army. Despite his colossal power, he is forced to retreat and the Orange Army is victorious. Hoping to use a secret passage into Greenhill, Ryo and Teresa are stopped by Luca, who threatens Teresa. After she is defeated, she says that her vengeance resulted from the poisoning of her father by Alec Wisemale. Teresa says the matter will be investigated honestly upon her return to power, and Luca reluctantly allows the group to pass. The adventurers enter Greenhill, where Yuber magically appears before them. The powerful general senses that Ryo carries a true rune, and calls forth a dark servant to challenge the group. The giant bone dragon appears but is soon destroyed. Yuber flees and warns that it is not easy to extinguish the flames of war. The people of the town warmly welcome the return of Teresa as their leader. At Dunan Castle, Klaus informs everyone that the Matilda Knights surrendered to Highland while the battle played out in Greenhill. With so many Highland troops diverted for the moment, the Orange Army decides to take back Muse. As they oversee the deployment, Flick and Victor wonder how much longer the war will last. The assassin Lucia is seen in the distance, and when followed, leads Ryo and his friends to Joey. He again requests that Ryo resign from the Orange Army and run away. Because he is still unwilling to do so, Joey realizes that neither party can go back to the way things were. Ryo and Joey invoke the power of their runes, and the latter declares that the runes destine the two to fight each other. Joey promises to bring a new order to the world as King of Highland, and walks away. Near Muse, Klaus points out that there is hardly any resistance from Highland, and the Orange Army wins the day. Inside Muse, the city is virtually empty. The Orange Army's raid team is alarmed at the presence of servants of the Beast Rune, however, which appear throughout the area. Luke says the Beast Rune was passed from Sasarai of Harmonia to the Blight clan long ago. To unleash its full power, the rune requires a blood sacrifice, which Luca Blight initiated against the entire city before he died. If the rune itself is awakened, he says it might manifest into a giant bloodthirsty demon. Highland soldiers are on the move to Muse, so Ryo and his friends are forced to retreat into Dunan. As part of a new strategy, Shu asks General Kiba to take a regiment and assault Victor's old mercenary fort. That way, Highland will have to divert troops to defend the kingdom. Believing the upcoming battle will decide the war, everyone assembles in the meeting room. Highland now possesses about 55,000 soldiers, while the Orange Army has 25,000. The remainder of the Orange Army will strike Matilda, where most of the enemy army is gathered. After they all commit to the plan, Leknot appears in front of everyone. She announces that the 108 Stars of Destiny have gathered once again under the leadership of Ryo. The bright shield rune then begins to emit a burst of light, releasing its full power. After Kiba's regiment sets out for their goal, Ryo and the rest of the army engage Joey in the fields near Matilda. Though he is aided by Yuber and Colgan, Shu arranges reinforcements to assist from the mercenary fort, and Highland is forced to retreat. The next target is Rockaxe Castle, so the Orange Army will attempt to lure Highland away, while Ryo leads a covert force inside. By taking the castle, Shu believes that many of Matilda's knights will stand down. As Ryo is poised to enter, a messenger reports that Kiba engaged Leon Silverberg in battle, and that Kiba was mortally wounded. Despite this, the Orange Army presses on with its mission, and Ryo enters the castle. Inside, Ryo and Nanami are surprised to find that Joey is there waiting for them. He refuses to let them pass, and knows Ryo cannot abandon his aspirations either. Joey intends to dissolve both Highland and the city-state and build a single powerful nation free from discord, jealousy, and antagonism. Gerudo stumbles upon the meeting and expresses his intent to kill both Ryo and Joey so that he can take the castle for Matilda. His archers fire a volley of arrows at them. They miss Ryo and Joey, but one of the arrows wounds Nanami. Both furious, Ryo and Joey join together to attack Gerudo. Though he and his knights are powerful, the two manage to overcome him. Joey walks away, and Ryo tends to Nanami as she speaks of her memories and appears to succumb to her wounds. Shu summons a doctor and orders the destruction of Rockaxe's flag. Upon seeing this, the Matilda Knights stand down. Highland has retreated into their own domain, and Shu says it is time to take the offensive and end the war. In an attempt to rally Highland soldiers, Joey pretends to sacrifice Gilia to the Beast Rune by stabbing her through the torso. In reality, her likeness is only a doll. In the final campaign, Shu stands head-to-head against his rival Leon Silverberg. He uses his tactical skills to lure Leon into the woods near the capital and sets fire to the area. As the woods burn, Shu steps into the field to find Leon standing near the dead Highland soldiers. Leon criticizes him for putting himself in danger, but Shu responds that he has evolved in his mentality toward war and has learned to care for others rather than just using them for his own ends. Despite Shu's victory, Leon berates his former student. Shu is briefly presumed dead, but reunites with Apple in the field. Guarding Lirenoi is Han Cunningham, Genkaku's former best friend that recognizes Ryo as his son. As the Orange Army moves in, Yuber disappears mysteriously. Ryo and his friends score a victory, and Highland forces retreat into the city. After they enter, Lucia confronts them all once again. Though she is defeated, she remains defiant until Teresa convinces her to stand down. Further along, they are stopped by Han, who says that he and Genkaku failed to stop the Bright Shield Rune and Black Sword Rune from fighting each other. To continue his clash with Genkaku, he challenges Ryo to a duel. When Han is defeated by Ryo, he apologizes that his and Genkaku's former runes have caused so much strife. Before he can explain how the Rune of Beginning can bring an end to the war, he collapses and dies before them. Deeper inside, Kolgan and Seed stand in opposition to Ryo, refusing to give up their country. They attack the party but are outmatched by the fighting skills of the group. Afterward, they fall to the ground and both accept their fate. Kolgan expresses that Joey was their hope as he orchestrated the end of Luca Blight and was leading Highland to a better future. In his bedchamber, Joey senses the end is nigh. He tells Palika it might be the last time she sees him, and she is overcome with sadness. After Gilia enters the room, Joey says he has arranged a home for them in Harmonia after the end of Highland. They are to flee there and start a new life together under assumed names. Gilia says that she always loved Joey, even though she knew he orchestrated the death of her father and brother. In the inner chamber of the palace, Ryo and his friends are met by Leon, who stands upon the demonic incarnation of the Beast Rune. He says that Luca planned to release the monster upon the entire world, which Leon has kept sealed until now. After cutting himself with a knife, his blood trickles onto the incarnation, the seal illuminates, and the power of the Beast Rune is revealed in the form of a giant two-headed monster. After the monstrosity is terminated, they enter the throne room and find Joey's coat draped upon the seat. Just then, the palace starts to rumble, and Ryo and his friends escape in the nick of time. Ryo is greeted as a hero upon his return, and everyone is overjoyed. Shortly afterward, leaders have arrived from the city-state to discuss a peace settlement. Though they all commit to rebuilding, Harmonia remains powerful, and Luca Blight successfully managed to divide factions of the city-state. Teresa proposes that a single unified country is created with Ryo as its leader, an idea that is backed by leaders of each region of the city-state. However, Ryo turns the opportunity down, still intending to find Joey. Ryo sets out to Tanzan Pass, where he and Joey agreed to meet if the two were separated long ago. There, he finds his friend waiting in front of the rock they carved before. Joey says he has no regrets, but if he did, it would be that he betrayed the city-state and assassinated Lady Annabelle. Joey says that though they took divergent paths, both he and Ryo were striving for the same thing, a world of peace. Though he hated Luca Blight, Joey came to believe if he became strong like him, he could protect those he loved and create a better world. Joey then insists on dueling Ryo to settle things for good. However, when the two stand before each other, Ryo cannot bring himself to attack his friend. Still insistent, Joey says the two need to fight to remove any trace of the Kingdom of Highland and claims that he has killed Gilia with his own two hands. Nevertheless, Ryo refuses. Realizing this, Joey falls to the ground in a weakened state. He explains that he expended considerable power by using the Black Sword Rune to stop Luca's attempt to revive the Beast Rune. In the process, the rune has been draining Joey of his life ever since. In harmony, the two runes react and begin to heal Joey. Leknot says the Rune of Beginning has formed again, and that the two should travel to other lands and make the world better. Though Joey is weary he has committed too many sins, Ryo intends to continue their friendship. As they leave, Shu greets them both. While he wished that Ryo would become the leader of the new country, he understands why they wish to escape discreetly. He admits that Nanami recovered fully, and asks Shu to help her escape the conflict because she couldn't bear the animosity of the war. After the war ends, the 108 Stars of Destiny celebrate their victory, though without their leader. Luke returns to the service of Leknot. Pesmerga leaves in search of Yuber. Flick and Victor set off on an aimless journey together. Some of the others travel to the other regions, including Harmonia and Toran. Back in Kyaro, both Ryo and Joey return to an ecstatic Nanami. All three of them set out on a journey together, reunited at last. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe to my channel for more storyline explanation videos, and click the bell to be alerted upon the creation of new content. Also, please consider using the join button to support the channel, check out my other videos, and leave a comment below with your favorite moment from Suikoden II.